Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Knee Deep in the Pod. I'm Dan.
And I'm Chris. And this podcast is basically a place for us to talk about games and reminisce about the good old days when we actually had time to play them. This week we're going to be talking about Who's in Control.
But before we dive into that, Chris, what have you been playing this week?
Okay, here we go. So, those that were listening to our last episode may not be surprised that I've been playing some more Dredge. Okay?
Yes.
I hope you're not bored of hearing about it, because I'm not bored of playing it, and I've got more to say. So,
hit me.
I haven't finished it yet. You've actually completed the game, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So, I think last time we spoke, I had done a couple days or something. I've just started and was getting start to get a feel for the game. Now I've explored all the main places,
Ooh.
done a whole load of the quests, and the whole game is I feel like I've seen a lot of it now. It's very exciting. So what was there to say? You go around finding interesting items for people, saving people from being stranded on islands, and I mentioned last time there's this kind of undercurrent, there's a bit of light horror
Undercurrent.
going on.
You're you can't talk about this game without accidentally making fisherman puns.
All right, keep your oar out of it. I'm talking here. So it's sort of a light horror. Well, I mean, I think people describe it as a Lovecraftian horror. So we're talking not necessarily talking Cthulhu, but it's that family of horror stuff. So it's kind of, scales and slimy stuff and all of that. And you start to see this, in some of the fish you catch, because some of them are malformed and look all creepy. But also there's kind of creepiness in some of the stuff you collect for people in their quests. And there are maybe big creepy fish that are might come out at night and try and get you. And also you start to gain powers through through some of the quests you complete, right? And some of those are they're not necessarily they're kind of a bit creepy or not, but they play with your mind. And there's a lot of, I think in Lovecraftian horror there's a lot of this balance of going crazy and not, and the more you sort of delve into what's going on and these all these kind of creatures and stuff, the closer you get to that, the more you're likely you are to lose your mind. And there's a bit of that going on in the game, because the less the sleep you get, the more you are affected and see things and maybe get attacked by things in the night, or stuff happens to you. But also one of the powers is basically going fast, right? There's this kind of haste, kind of fast thing. And there's danger there because you can burn out your engines. That sucks. But also, I think it adds to your stress, or and again, means that you might see more stuff, or, be affected by the bad stuff going on. Most recently, I've been around this, volcanic set of islands, and there's this nasty fish that's blind and has all sorts of tiny fish that basically see for it, and it's if it finds you, they start shouting, and then the big fish is going to come eat you.
Oh, that was a hard one.
It's tough, man. But anyway, what can I say? I keep coming back to this game. It's got that it does do days. You're not stuck with having to do a day. But you do kind of find yourself doing I'll just do one more day, or I'll just do this bit. I want to finish this quest. I want to finish this day, or I want to catch these fish, whatever. So I find it very addictive, but also for the most part, kind of just quite. It's kind of calm and relaxing, whilst also having elements of stress and panic. It's a lovely mix of stuff. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. By the way, so for those that don't know, this game Dredge, there's kind of 5 sets of islands, right? There's kind of the central island, and then there's 4 areas that you mostly go to explore and do stuff.
Yeah.
But one time, because you zoom out in the map, and there's like it's kind of a circular area, and then it's like this like dotted line, and I was like, well, what happens if you just keep going?
What, keep going?
Just keep going.
Like in a direction?
Yeah, just keep going as far as you can in one direction. What happens?
Okay.
So have you
What
done
did
this?
happen? No.
Okay. So you have quite a while of not a lot, just water. And it's fun, like, as you're going along in Dredge, like, you do just see, like, there's a whale, like, just popping up, or here's some dolphins, and that's, it's just kind of nice atmosphere and stuff.
Yeah.
If you go far enough, because I was like, how are they going to stop you? Like, what happens? How can they stop you from just, like, leaving the zone? Is it going to be like the Truman Show, and there's a wall? Like, how's it gonna work? And basically, eventually you get to this point where you start to get like a warning message, like uncharted waters.
Right.
And I was like, okay, fine, but still you can keep going. And then some like mega beast basically starts to emerge, and then like,
oh my word.
Yeah, and like starts like swimming around your ship, and like you need to like retreat, otherwise you're gonna die. So that's how they prevent you from from leaving. Actually, that might tie in nicely to our topic in a moment, because you might argue that I was kind of trying to break the game, not quite break the game, but sort of perhaps go against the intended, certainly the intended area that you're supposed to be in. But anyway, more on that later. Dan, what have you been playing?
I have been playing a game called Potion Craft.
Ooh.
Basically, in the Steam sales over Christmas,
yeah,
there were a few games that I wanted to buy, and two of those were Balatro, however you like to say it, and Dave the Diver, both of which have become enormously popular in recent times. And so I was going to buy those anyway, but then I noticed they were in a bundle with this other game, Potion Craft, which I'd never heard of. So I just got the bundle. And it turns out Potion Craft is actually really fun.
Oh, right.
Basically, you're like role-playing an alchemist, and every day has like a very simple format. You wake up, you harvest some herbs from your garden, and then you open your shop. People come in one after another and they say, hey, I need a potion to help me lift a heavy boulder. And then you go into your lab and you rustle up a strength potion, and then you give it to them. And then the next person comes along, I need a potion to help me in bed.
Okay.
Literally. And then you go away and you make a potion of libido.
Okay.
And there's a couple of sort of mini games involved in this process. So when you're making the potions, there's what's called the potion map. And basically, different herbs will move your kind of potion symbol in different directions around the map. So you have to choose different herbs to kind of explore the map in different directions to find different potion effects that you can then use in your potions. And then there's also another mini game when you come to actually sell the potions to the people. There's a sort of haggling mini game which can help you to get more money for your potions. So it's quite a simple game, but I've been enjoying it, and it's got that very addictive quality, a bit like you touched on with Dredge, because it's all split into days, and at the end of the day, you go to bed, and then you wake up and you think, oh, I'll just check on my garden. Yeah. And then before you know it, you're harvesting your herbs, and then I might as well open the shop, and then you've done another day.
Nice. Is there an end game, or is it just kind of you just kind of go in and sell some potions, and that's just nice?
Yeah, you do have goals. So you start off with a very limited supply of herbs, and you can't really get very far on your alchemy map. And then as you get more herbs, you're able to explore further and discover more effects. So I suppose your capabilities increase as time goes on. You're able to make more complex potions to get more money, and you can also spend that money on like upgrades to your lab and this, that, and the other. So there are goals, yeah.
Nice. I do find in Dredge quite gratifying kind of upgrading your boat, and when you get like,
Yeah.
there's like a little upgrades, and then you get these kind of big points of upgrade as well, and it's like, oh yes, I can fit more in, and I can take more damage and
go faster.
Something very something very satisfying about that. Man, actually the speed, and that's one of the things, like when you first play the game, really gives you a sense of like, this is a chilled out, just relaxed game, because you go like, you really slow. Like you are not in a hurry to get anywhere. And at the early doors, that's fine, because everything you do is kind of close by. Later on, not so much. And I think in that volcano area, I took some damage, and like basically my big engine broke, and I was back down to like the engine you start with.
Yeah. Gosh,
it was slow. Like I couldn't believe how slow it was. I was like, wow, is this really what I was used to back when I started? This is nuts. Can't go back now.
So before we start today's episode then on who's in control, do you have any follow-up?
I think you're the master of follow-up, man.
I just have one small thing, because I was re-listening to episode 1 recently.
Oh, yes.
And I noticed something kind of amusing, which is that in episode, I think it was episode 7, like last episode or the one before, we spoke about cheats.
Yes.
And how, modern games don't really do cheats. Like, remember the good old days where cheats were a thing? And basically when I went back to listen to episode 1, I realized we'd had that exact same conversation before. So we've obviously made enough episodes now that we're just repeating ourselves without even realizing it.
It's just cyclical. It's comforting, to all our listeners. Sometimes you don't want anything new. You just want what's familiar. So we're here to help you out.
So on to this episode, which is about replayability. But seriously, who's in control? What do we mean by that, Chris? And why are we talking about that today?
Okay, so who's in control? Here we're sort of talking about players and designers, like game designers, okay? So, a game company are going to create a game, and they're going to have all sorts of ideas of what makes that game fun. I know, you talk quite a lot about that phrase, finding the fun, right? And, there'll be elements of the game where maybe people have certain mechanics in mind, and ideas about, how the player might feel, and, what elements of the game make it engaging, right? And a great deal of design and effort and, work has gone into that from the team that's developing the game. Now, is that the best way to play the game? And how much control should the designers have over how people want to play it? Because, we've seen, and we'll talk about this, we see that sometimes players will take a game and, enjoy it in a completely different way, or, take a different slant on it, and sometimes make it, completely their own. So who's right? What's the right thing? Should developers, have a clear vision and like maintain that vision, perhaps even forcefully in the way that they design the game? Or should players be given free reign to do whatever they like? Thanks developers, you've given us a playground, now back off, we're going to do what we want with it.
Yeah, so to just give a really simple example, it's what you're saying with Dredge, A player might decide, hey, I just want to sail off into the sunset. But the designers have kind of imposed a restriction and said, no, you can't go past this point. Which I think in this example makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's nothing to be gained by just sailing off into the distance. There's nothing there.
Yeah, there's nothing to do. But I was just curious, right?
But I'm sure there are other examples that we'll talk about which are less clear-cut. Maybe people want to enjoy the game in a certain way, which is arguably a completely legitimate way to play the game, but it's just not what the designers intended. And some designers are cool with that, and some less so. Yeah.
So I've got an example that I would like to dive into pretty much straight away, if that's cool with you.
Absolutely.
So this is the one that I think I've most got my head wrapped around, and I find it really interesting. It won't surprise our viewers to hear that I'm about to talk about Doom Eternal and Doom 2016. But just because their designers I've gone looking for it, of course, but they have been really open and talked a lot about this idea of the design of the game and how they kind of have adapted their designs to funnel players into what they call the fun zone. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's their slang, or that's their kind of term they've made for like, this is like the collection of things that when a player does these things, they will engage and have the most fun playing our game. They're actually, in their opinion, they're quite adamant about it. Yeah. They're quite clear about it. They're like, this is the best way for people to enjoy the game. And it came from experience. So back in 2016, they brought out the Doom relaunch, reboot, that game.
Yeah.
To much acclaim and great success. And I still love that game. I go back and play it sometimes. It's a great game. And I think it does a lot of things right. But one of the things that was like criticized, I think, to be honest, I think they probably criticized themselves more than it was criticized by people, perhaps. But, that you've got all these different weapons in the game, and there's a lot of variety of, how you can handle the enemies that are thrown at you and all this stuff. And interestingly, I found that I would use the weapons and like situationally and be like, oh, this sort of weapon I like for this sort of scenario, this one not so much. And that is kind of how they wanted the game to be played. But ultimately, people discovered that if you just get a super shotgun and blast people point blank in the face, that is basically just as effective, if not more effective, than being smart with your weapon choices and being considered and managing these different things. So when it came to Doom Eternal, they were like, right, we really want to push this point because we believe that managing resources which in this case is like your ammo, but also your health and armor, you become an active participant in managing health and armor because there are ways that you can essentially kind of harvest or gain those resources by the way you kill enemies.
Yeah.
So they kind of talk about player accountability and say well, basically putting more your survival and we're putting all the resources basically in your hands. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And they also limited the amount of ammo you can have for weapons quite a lot. So you're encouraged to swap weapons a lot because there isn't a lot of ammo for each one, and also there's quite a lot of enemy specific benefits to using certain weapons, and so you're forced to think on your feet a lot and change and adapt.
Yeah.
And that's based on their philosophy of that is the fun zone. That is when people are most engaged. And for that game, I think I agree. I don't have any problem with that. I think I respect that they've got such a clear vision of what makes their game fun, of what the best way to play is, in terms of keeping a player engaged. I'm into it.
It's so funny that you bring this up as an example, because all the reasons you're giving, like ammo scarcity, being forced to use certain weapons in certain situations, those are exactly the reasons why I don't like the modern Doom games.
Yeah.
Because they've taken what was, if we think about original Doom, there was some strategy, sure, in which weapons you chose, but most of the time, I'd say, in a run, you didn't have to worry that much about ammo, and a lot of weapons were viable in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
And it was just fun for me running around shooting demons.
Yeah.
And they've taken that and they've turned it into a resource management game, which for me is just a lot less fun. I don't enjoy running out of ammo. That's one of the reasons why in Abacus there is no ammo, because I find unlimited ammo to be just, it's one less thing to worry about, and for me that's more fun. Maybe not in every case, but running out of ammo, having to manage your like ammo counts, and like you say, they've turned health and armor into similar resources, like that's stressful. That's not what I'm there for. I just want to be able to run around and shoot things. So if they gave me a mode where I could do that, you know, if they exposed some settings like a ×2 ammo mode or something like that, that would actually enhance my enjoyment of the game, even though it doesn't align with their vision.
Yeah, and we have talked about, you know, you can unlock cheat codes to have like unlimited ammo, for example. But I think you need to like play the level without a cheat code first, and you can like return to it with them. So like, you know, wouldn't quite scratch the itch for you, I don't think. But you're right, and I wasn't surprised when you said, I know that they don't quite. You don't love those games in the way that I do. I wonder if like that's actually, I don't know, this might get a bit philosophical now, but I think oftentimes if there's like a really good film or a really good any piece of art, it can often be quite divisive. Like people can like really love it, or people are like, oh no, it's not for me. And like maybe like a price or a cost of like, because that's quite a dedicated vision, isn't it? It's quite a strong vision of like, this is what it is. I suspect they would probably be like, if you don't like those things, this game isn't for you. And that's fine. You know, there are plenty of games where you can go and do the things you want to do, but that's not this game.
So I suppose that's really the question that that we're looking to answer, isn't it? Is like, is that a valid approach, do you think? Should designers be able to just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, go find a different game? Or should they make their games more accommodating? Should they try and appeal to everyone? What do you think?
I think, outside of the context of games for a moment, like I would my sort of general wisdom on that would be, if you try to please everyone, generally you end up pleasing no one.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I wonder if there's some truth to that in designing a game as well. But, I guess, even within that request, like make it fun for me as well, you're still not going to, a first-person shooter game, if someone doesn't like first-person shooters, regardless of the different features or changes you make, they're probably never going to like a game, because ultimately that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's a first-person shooter. It's not a real-time strategy game, so tough. So there's, even if they were to broaden it, there's only so far. There's only so wider audience you can please. But all that said, probably one of my earliest memories of playing a game perhaps how it's not intended, and really enjoying that, is actually playing original Doom and putting like God mode on, or or no clip mode, where you can just like stroll through the map, walk through walls, do whatever, it doesn't matter. You can just walk through anything. And I loved all that. I loved doing that. It was such fun.
Yeah.
And that was not the intention of the level designers and like people trying to create challenge in the game and all that sort of stuff. It's just like, hey, throw all that to the wind. I'm just going to run about and kill things with no danger and just have fun.
Yeah.
Can you think of any particular examples of you playing a game perhaps how it was not intended?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really great question. Let me think about that. I was going to answer my own question.
Please.
Which is, you're right. Like, you can't cater to everyone, no matter how many options you add, unless you're prepared to turn your first-person shooter into a farm simulator, It's just not possible. And even if it was possible, I respect the freedom of the designers to make the game that they want to make. So I asked the question, like, should designers be more accommodating? To be honest, I think it's really up to them. I don't like kind of enforcing any expectations onto game designers, because I respect their artistic freedom.
Yeah.
But I suppose if you're thinking pragmatically, if there's a quick win that you can put into your game that opens it up to a wider audience, should you do that? Probably. Like, if it's gonna make the game more popular, it's gonna make you more money. I don't think there's any sense in being really stubborn about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something you see. I mean, I'm going to briefly, I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but, you know, one cohort of gamers that you might suggest are often playing games not how they're intended is speedrunners, right? Like, they are...
Oh, yeah.
They're a minority group, but they're also... If people like watching people play games, they're often the ones that, you know, streaming and twitching, and, you know, people go watch them, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, so something that was frequently an irritation to speedrunners, but also just to people that have, like, replayed the game quite a lot in Doom was cutscenes, and just, like, having the option to, like, turn cutscenes off. Because, like, the first time you play, and maybe even the first few times, it's like they're having the impact that's intended. They're giving, like, the narrative, and, like, that's really great.
Yeah.
Once you've played 5 times, you're perhaps less bothered about that, and you just want to keep playing and, like, be in the action all the time.
Just want to skip through them, yeah.
Yeah, just want to skip to the good bit, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, that is an option that they added for people like that. So I think you're right. You know, if there are, as you say, if there are, like, quick wins, or things that are not too much of a hassle that will make a big difference to people, then absolutely.
Related to that, and something that I think is definitely worth talking about, is difficulty settings and also accessibility settings.
Okay.
And they go sort of hand in hand sometimes. Difficulty settings, I can understand designers not wanting to add them necessarily. They might have certain ideas about the difficulty level of their game.
Yeah.
But accessibility settings is like, you know, if someone has got a disability, they literally can't play your game the way you designed it.
Yeah.
So are there some settings you can add that will actually enable them to play and enjoy your game?
Yeah. Out of interest, can you give me an example of an accessibility setting? And are there accessibility settings that you've implemented?
Good question. So sometimes there'll be things like colorblind mode, stuff that visually changes the game, but it's not really changing the gameplay.
Yeah.
But then you might have accessibility settings where, like, if rapid button presses are required, like an action event or something, where it's like, you know, hammer A to get away from the monster's claws, and you're having to rapidly press this button. Some people, if they've got a disability, they can't do that. So you might provide a setting to let them sort of skip past that section, or, like, you know, there's some other way that they can progress the game.
Right, yeah.
Which I think is fair enough, because, like, hammering A, it's not exactly like a fundamental gameplay mechanic. It's like a chore at best. So I would say I'm in favour of that.
Okay, fair play. So some games have been taken to the farthest reaches of, like, not necessarily what the devs intended. And by that I mean kind of mods, essentially, and not just, you know, which range from, like, quality of life improvements, or, you know, little bits and changes here and there, maybe, like, change the weapon set that's available, or, you know, stuff like that, to, like, add some levels that, or, you know, or areas that weren't available before.
Yeah.
To basically entire new games that just happen to use the same engine of you know, Doom or Unreal Tournament or whatever, you know, whatever those games are. for example, the original Team Fortress was a mod of Quake, I think it was. So like what has become, obviously Team Fortress 2 then spawned out of that and has been a huge success. That's just it's still a first-person shooter, but it's a very different game to Quake. And that was made possible. I think the id guys were quite open about that, just like, here's our code, or here are the tools you need to just like go have fun.
Yeah, you get different attitudes towards mods in development circles, don't you? Because some developers, they're extremely accommodating of mods and they'll encourage that. And I think in a lot of cases that actually can significantly boost the popularity of the game.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly now about Minecraft because, mods are a huge part of Minecraft. And actually, even before mods were really a thing, I think people were playing the game in a way that was not necessarily how it was intended. And that led to the game gaining popularity. I'm talking specifically about like the Yogscast. That's an example that comes to mind. They found all sorts of interesting things that they could do with the game that people hadn't thought of yet or hadn't tried.
Right.
And they started making this video series which gained a sort of a story, and they had, even before Minecraft supported any of this stuff officially, they had like NPCs.
Oh wow.
Who were really just other players on the server, like typing as if they were an NPC, but they kind of played along with it.
Okay.
And they created like a lot of really fun worlds and experiences, and I think that helped a lot with Minecraft's popularity. As for, whether that was intended or not by the game, like, it's a sandbox game, arguably anything's fair game.
Yeah. What you said there about, was it Yogscast?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that reminds me of other instances where people have used game engines like for video content and for like basically creating stories. So there's a series that uses like the Halo engine to like tell a story. Basically, there's like these two teams, and they're like, it's basically a comedy. It's kind of a sitcom type thing, but everyone looks like Master Chief, but with different colors. That's basically it. And, they kind of bob their heads when they're talking and that sort of thing. But it's like, I loved it when it came out. I just thought it was so fun. And you see, there's been a lot of that for like the Team Fortress 2 characters. People have made like cinematic stuff with them. And, there are other examples as well. So, in fact, in Minecraft as well, people have made, series, and like, I think they even go as far as like, there's like Minecraft content on Netflix. Like there's there's loads of this stuff. In fact, what was the other one? It was the Source engine. So like what Half-Life was made out of. Or it was made in. So like that, there's like the Source. I forget what it's called, but again, like basically make videos and stuff out of like the assets and content they have in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that there's definitely, as you say, in terms of popularity, there's a lot of scope for that being, a great boon to the game, where people can, create their own content and it adds to the popularity of the game. That certainly was the case for Doom. It was also the case for Unreal Tournament or the Unreal games. I think, possibly to a slight fault. I think that's one of the criticisms of Unreal Tournament 3. There was a feeling that it was a bit bare bones, and that it was a bit like here you go, that's enough, and now we're going to let the modding community do the rest, essentially.
A bit like Bethesda with their bug fixes.
But what is a Bethesda game without some bugs in it? I think that's just part of the charm.
Certainly, plenty of memes have come out of that. I'm still racking my brain trying to think of if there are games that I've played in ways that weren't intended, and I'm sure there are, but the best example I can think of is Age of Mythology,
Okay.
Because on the surface, that's a real-time strategy game, but it came with a very rich level editor. So you could create sort of like, you could turn it into an RPG, basically. You could have heroes that would level up as they fought enemies and gained abilities and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
And I used to love making stuff in the level editor, so I definitely played some unusual levels back in those days. But again, like, I think when something has a very fully fledged editor, or when something is a bit sandboxy, it sort of begs the question of like, actually, is this part of the intended experience? Yeah. Even though it's not what you think of when you think of the game, the fact that the functionality is there kind of suggests that perhaps the developers were kind of hoping that this scene would develop, you know?
Mm-hmm. So I do have an example of something that I would do with a game that's not what you're intended to do at all. So a good friend of mine and I we would play so much Star Wars Battlefront. Like, every time we met up, we'd just play hours of Star Wars Battlefront. And it got to the point where it was almost, I mean, particularly if we were on the same team, it became almost trivial. Like, we were gonna win every time. You know, with both of us fighting on the same side, we were gonna win. And, you know, if we were against each other, mostly it became, you know, because kind of the point of the game is there's loads of guys running about, right? And you're just one of the guys having part of this battle. And like, the hope when you play is that you influence your team's success enough that, you know, your team or your army win.
It's a brilliant concept, isn't it, really?
It's, you know what? It was mind-blowing when it first came out to me. And I remember, actually, it was one of those times, just like, some friends, like family friends, just turned up one day. You know, I guess they're in the area and they're on the way back. I don't know. They were traveling around and they dropped in with their kids and, like, not much notice. And the boy, you know, we were hanging, like, we got talking and, you know, I was like, hey, do you want to come up to my room and we'll, like, play some PlayStation? He was like, yeah. And I showed him Battlefront. And at the end of, like, showing him Battlefront, he was like, he said, like, this was the best birthday ever.
Oh, really?
I didn't know until then that it was his birthday.
Oh,
but he was like, but, you know, they were just passing through, but, like, it clearly blew his mind just as much as mine. Like, he was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And it was, at the time, it was like the idea of having so many NPCs running around and, like, having some on your team as well and being able to command them. It was, like, huge. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack, really. Me and my friend got so good at this game. And, you know, we'd have a lot of fun doing the, like, galactic conquest against each other, which basically meant it was a face-off between me and him every map. And there happened to be some other dudes flying around, because whatever. But we would play games when we were on the same team, and we would make it our mission to kill each other.
Okay.
Like, the whole purpose was like, hey, we're on the same team, and in this game, for people that don't know, you respawn every time you die, and you just like pick like the class you're going to be, and just like spawn again. Here we go. So we would just like constantly just be killing each other, and that would be kind of funny. We wouldn't. Sometimes it would be unspoken. We wouldn't necessarily say, "Oh, we're going to spend this whole time killing each other." But maybe we'd be playing normally, and then one of us would like turn on the other, and then it begins. And the game became, how long can we just like muck about killing each other whilst paying no attention to the battle going on, and then still win the battle? like diving catch, like at the very end, like, oh, we've not got many guys left, we better take this seriously now, and then like still win. So we're like firing rockets at each other from like halfway across the map and like sniping each other in like just stupid, silly stuff. It was such fun. And
that's brilliant.
Once there were only like 20 guys left on our team, it was like, oh, pants, right, better win. Quickly, win.
That's a great example. I've thought of another one, actually. Another Star Wars one, funnily enough.
Oh, yeah?
But this was Lego Star Wars on the
Yeah.
PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much me, but my brothers. I remember they would spend entire afternoons just dueling each other in like I think it was the very first level where you're on a spaceship, like in the lobby of a spaceship or something.
Yeah.
And they would just have tournaments where they would fight every kind of character against every other kind of character.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe let's try a Jedi against a guy with a blaster.
Yeah.
And they would just play that for hours. It's not even a PvP game, but it was for them.
Awesome. I remember that, actually. Because there's so many characters to choose from. Like there are hours and hours of fun if you want to do that.
There are loads of characters, yeah. That's part of the fun of those Lego games, isn't it? But I think they broadly fit into a handful of buckets, don't they? There's like the Jedi, the blaster people.
Yeah.
Maybe some droids, I don't know.
Yeah. So, have you ever been frustrated? Like, have you wanted to do something with a game and then like not had the chance because they are quite restrictive?
That's a great question.
Whilst you think about that,
yeah,
I was kind of thinking, there are some games that are just so focused on what they are, it's hard to, what else could you do with them? And I suppose those examples actually of like those two Star Wars examples are maybe like the best, are the inspiration. I was thinking like a dance mat game. Like, what is there beyond just like you dance to the songs? Like, what can you? There's not a lot. I guess you can like just make up your own moves and ignore what it's telling you to, the buttons it's telling you to press. But eventually you just die, or you lose because you didn't do the thing. I guess
you can come up with like different meta games, like, oh, I'm going to play this song, but I'm going to face backwards.
Okay, yeah,
or
okay.
Like, I'm going to, I don't know, stand on my knees or something like that,
Yeah. I just also remember putting like, because there were like different difficulties of the dances, and like you get to the point where there are like so many things you need to do all the time. I don't think they're even very achievable. So you just like set it on like the hardest difficulty, which was like paramount or something, and it'd just be like, how long can you last? You're just like frantically like pressing buttons until you lose.
Well, that sort of reminds me of, I'm hesitant to bring up Doom again because we talk about it so much, but in original Doom, when they added nightmare difficulty mode, they kind of did it as a joke, right? They didn't expect that anyone would actually play on that difficulty, and yet people have taken that as a challenge and beaten it in all sorts of crazy ways.
That's right, and that kind of brings us kind of back to speedrunning, or to a degree, but there's speedrunning, but there's also other kinds of runs, right? Of like completing a game.
Yeah, extra restrictions and stuff.
Yeah, and so what? Give me a few examples of that.
Or like speed runs where there are certain restrictions.
Yeah,
there might be I mean, the most extreme example that comes to mind is someone who's beat like all the FromSoft games back to back.
Whoa!
Like the what do we call it? The name of the
Dark Souls.
Like all the Dark Souls games back to back without getting hit, for example.
Yeah.
Which is definitely not how the game was meant to be played.
Yeah. I mean, the one that was sort of coming to my mind was what's called a pacifist run, right? So,
oh yeah,
and this isn't restricted to Doom. Like you can, lots of games where you can do a pacifist run, where essentially you don't kill anyone, or I mean, there are different levels of it. Maybe you don't kill anyone, or you don't kill anyone that you don't have to. Like sometimes there's the occasional enemy like you can't progress unless you kill them, or I think for like some definitions of a pacifist run for Doom, for example, is like you can attack enemies but only with your fists, so which is like super ineffectual and dangerous. So generally you wouldn't do that very much. So yeah, the idea is that you kind of play through all the levels without killing any demons.
I've seen similar runs as well in other games like Hollow Knight, where people just come up with like the craziest restrictions. Like I've seen a run recently where it was like, can I beat Hollow Knight without touching grass? Which is just super random, but it's just funny to see people come up with these creative challenges and then see if they can do it. Or another one is in the old Spyro games, can I beat Spyro 2 without gliding?
Whoa.
Which sounds
what?
ridiculous, right? But then people come up with all sorts of clever tricks you can do to actually get around maybe even the whole game without gliding.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just doesn't even seem like, that doesn't sound possible. But
I know.
That's nuts.
There might be some glitches involved.
Oh, yeah. To Hollow Knight, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind as like a restriction would be like no charms. Like,
oh, that'd be too easy for many of these speedrunners, I think.
You're probably right. I think I would find that hard, but yeah, I think you're right. You know, I was actually, this is a bit of a tangent now, but I was watching a video that was like rating the charms in Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
And like, aside from a couple, which were like, these are utility things that you obviously want, or at least you obviously want for the first half of the game, and then you can get rid because you've kind of, you're beyond needing them anymore. Like, pretty much all the ones that I would tend to use were like the lowest or second to lowest tiers.
Really?
Yeah. And it would like give quite compelling reasons for why they weren't great. And I was like, oh man, I was choosing bad charms.
I quite often found with that game that I would get stuck on a boss and then I'd have to go away and kind of change all my charms, and only then was I able to beat the boss, which to me points to a really well-balanced game. Like, talking about, playing the way that the designers intended. If they intended that you have to adapt your play style to beat certain bosses, then I think they absolutely nailed it, because I did.
Yeah, I found the same. Yeah, some bosses were like, I'd try them again and again, it just wasn't working, and I was like, I need to change something. I need to change my charms and how I'm approaching this. It's interesting that you found that. Yeah, you found that to be interesting and engaging in that instance. But when the new Doom games were asking you to kind of adapt to the different situations, that you were like, I just want to like shoot stuff and not be, not have to listen to what you're trying to make me do.
Yeah, it sounds a bit hypocritical, doesn't it? But I think with Hollow Knight, I never felt like I was forced to do a particular play style. And in fact, when I did adapt, it actually was more satisfying because I felt like I found a solution that worked for this particular boss, but it wasn't like I was being forced to use it. And also, I think it comes down to resource scarcity. I just don't like that mechanic.
It's interesting because there's sort of two things there, because there's adjusting your charms in Hollow Knight to suit the situation, but then also what you'll see in games that have these mechanics like charms and other games, they'll call them different things, but there are these kind of essentially ongoing effects that you can choose and maybe swap out that affect kind of how you play the game, and they'll often be pitched sometimes as like help you play the way you want to play, or kind of adjust the game to fit your style of play. That kind of phrase, And so it's kind of interesting to me that that with games that have that, they are, the devs are essentially saying, there are a bunch of different ways to play this game. There are different preferences that people have. We should just accommodate that by having all these kind of, optional effects that people can put on their players, on the thing that on the guy they're controlling.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that question you asked. Have I ever played a game that I've found overly restrictive? Like, I've wanted to do something and the game hasn't permitted me to do that thing.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling. The only example that I've been able to come up with is, and it's not even a specific example, it's just a kind of vague something I'm sure has happened.
Yeah.
Have you ever had it where you find a spot in a game where you think you're able to get out of bounds? You think, oh, if I just jump here, I'll be able to get onto that like pillar that I'm definitely not supposed to be able to stand on.
Yes.
And you should be able to make the jump if you just look at the distance.
Yeah.
It all looks feasible, but then you actually try it and there's an invisible wall or something like that.
Yeah.
I find that frustrating because I think like good level design shouldn't rely on invisible walls. You know, if I can see that I can jump somewhere, I want to be able to jump there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%. That was we've probably spoken about this before. That was like one of the design principles at id, was like, if you can see a place, you should be able to go there.
Yeah.
And that was often like, and you'll see this in game design all the time, where, you know, a power up or some like special, you know, something you want to collect that's really useful to you will be put in plain sight, but completely inaccessible.
It's so devious.
Yeah, so it's like you can't go there, but you want to find it and you want to go there. How do I get there? You know, you're thinking, and so you end up, you know, searching around and like, you know, in the different like nooks and crannies of the level to like, how do I reach the thing? I saw it. It was there. Which that's like a classic, design approach that you'll often see. But you're right. It can be quite frustrating when you're shown something and it's just not possible. Interestingly, my mind actually goes back to Star Wars Battlefront, because there are certain levels there where you kind of, you know, when you get into an out of bounds bit and you know you're out of bounds and things aren't behaving quite right, but you're kind of forcing it anyway. So that there are like some like platforms that you shouldn't. I don't think you're ever intended to go there, but you can like, if you like do a jump just so you can make it to be on, like, stand on this other platform, and like it doesn't behave quite like a normal flat platform. Like, I think, you know, you're kind of sliding off it and you have to like adjust for that, because it's like you don't belong, and like maybe if you walk, you know, in a certain direction, it would kind of almost push you off, like it does, like you're not supposed to be here. But it was like, also as a player, it was like, it's exciting and like really interesting. It's like, I'm breaking, I'm doing it, nothing can stop me, like I'm going here. And
it's
from that vantage
fun.
point, you can, like, you know, shoot things that you shouldn't be able to shoot.
It's super fun when you're able to get out of bounds, or when you feel like you're out of bounds, like you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be here, but actually it's just a part of the level. Like, Portal, for example, has this where you know, you're in these test chambers and everything's like pristine, clean, white walls and everything.
Yeah.
And then at some point there's a loose panel and you go inside and it's like this like grimy, grungy, like storage room or something.
Yeah.
And it's like you're behind the scenes and there's graffiti on the walls and it's like, whoa, what's going on? I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
I really like that feeling. And I think that secrets in games that make you feel like you're out of bounds are always just really enjoyable to explore.
Yeah, that is like really good design if that happens. Yeah, like as you say, when like you make the player feel like they're out of bounds, and like I've if you feel special and you feel like, oh, this is, and it's exciting, you know, it's really gratifying.
It's a question of like, should I be here?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Of course, in some games, you shouldn't be there, and you've just found a bug, and you're like trapped now. I've probably benefited from, you know, knowing people like you when it comes to playing back to the Bethesda like open world games like Morrowind, etc. Like, sometimes you need to know the console commands to, like, I think they like make them relatively like well known-ish, because like You would need to just like reset. I think there's like just a command for like reset because like I'm trapped in a crevice and I can't get out.
Oh yeah, sometimes you just need that console. I don't know what I'd have done on Xbox, because Morrowind came out on Xbox, right, as well.
Yeah, okay.
It was released on Xbox, but I don't think you could access the console at all.
Right.
So if you got stuck, that was it. Like, start over. Thanks for playing.
So coming back to your experience of like being like designing games and being involved with that, do you find you have like quite a clear vision of what you want the player to do, or you know, or to enjoy? You know, you talk about finding the fun. Do you sort of have the like quite a clear idea of like, this is what I want them to do at this point? You know, how clearly defined is that?
I think when I'm making a game, a lot of the time I'm just making what I think is fun.
Okay.
And I have a good idea of what I think is fun, but I'm not necessarily thinking about all players.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I would need to change if I actually wanted to make something that was commercially viable. I'd have to think more about like broader appeal rather than just what do I find fun.
Yeah.
But I think I'm just thinking about Abacus. Like, I had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted the player to be experiencing at certain points in the game. Like, one example that comes to mind, and it comes back to this like feeling of being out of bounds that we talked about. There's a level called Sizzling Sands, and when you first arrive at the level, you can't really explore very thoroughly because you're in danger of overheating. So you have to stay to like these safe areas. And if you stay out of these safe areas too long in the sun, you burn up.
Yeah.
But then later there's like a secret area in another level that lets you come back, and you have like a sunbrella to protect you from the heat. And then you can fully explore the level. And it's like suddenly all these places which were previously inaccessible are now open to you. And I found that fun, at least. I thought that was like a fun concept. It was kind of based, I guess, on Ratchet and Clank, because there's a planet called Orxon, which is all covered in pollution. And when you first visit the planet, you can only explore as Clank, because Ratchet can't breathe the air. But then later you come back with the O2 mask and you can explore everything, and it's like the world opens up to you. I think there's just something fun about that, which I wanted to replicate.
Yeah, I think that's kind of almost linked to some degree to the like out of bounds thing, because it's like, whilst it's not kind of out of bounds, it was not, you know, you were not able to explore these areas before, and now you can. I remember that, and I think again there's that sense of wonder and excitement when that change happens. So like when you get the sunbrella, as you say, like I remember being like, oh, like, because you'd try and like, you know, ride the edge of how long you can stay out in the sun before you need to like get back to an oasis thing. And you'd like, what's up there? And there'd be, you know, of course there'd be collectibles and like enemies and things that you can't get to, you know, until you have that. So yeah, I think that is really effective. Yeah, it was really effective in Abacus, but it is a very effective mechanic.
So who's in control, the designer or the player? I don't think we really reached a solid verdict, except that different designers have different philosophies. Yeah.
Different designers have different philosophies, and you respect their artistic vision.
Yeah.
I think it is appropriate, you know, from like for different games, you know, there's a place for the kind of narrow, really focused idea of like, this is what this game is, that has its own appeal and sort of audience. But then there's awesome and fun benefits to just like opening it up and just being like, hey, this is where we started, but we're going to open this up for you guys to do what you want. And that's had like a load of tales of big success. So who's in control? I was going to say you decide, like those toy adverts, like what's going to happen to Action Man. You decide.
On road, off road, no road. Hot Wheels leading the way.
So, thank you for joining us for episode 9 of Knee Deep in the Pod. I've been Chris.
I've been Dan. I'm still Dan. I am Dan.
See you later.
Okay, bye.